Okay. So we have ultramarine violet, cadmium yellow medium, burnt umber, titanium buff, and titanium white. So now we're going to take titanium buff, and I'll work slowly. And I'm going to take ultramarine violet. I'm not worried if it goes dark, that's okay, no problem. And it's going to dry darker, so we'll highlight it later on. Okay, we should go a bit darker. So if I'm finding that this is not enough, not dark enough, I could take a little bit of burnt umber, put it in. Okay, that's perfect. That's better, actually.
Layal, did you put burnt umber in it as well?
Pardon?
Did you put burnt umber in it as well?
Yes, yeah, just a bit of burnt umber in there. Yes, yes. Okay, that's a little bit more burnt umber because I'm finding that it's not dark enough. So this color has a lot of warmth in it. If I'm finding that ultramarine violet is a bit too cool, that's why I am adding burnt umber to give it that warm color in there. So when I'm moving down to this part, I'm finding that it becomes more burnt umber, less of the ultramarine violet. So that's what I'm doing. And like I mentioned before, I'm not worried about the color turning too dark. That's okay. That's perfect, actually, because I can highlight all of that, and it should be highlighted over. You know, I should put highlights over a darker color. Now coming to this part here, I really don't have to. I don't have to go too dark. So I'm going to take a bit of more burnt umber in here. So my burnt umber has a bit of ultramarine violet and titanium buff. It's not just burnt umber, okay? It will look much, much better once we start putting highlights in there. Now, coming down, here in this part, it's going to be the same. It's burnt umber, titanium buff, a bit of touch, very small amount of ultramarine violet, and now I'm going to start adding yellow. And this yellow is perfect because it's warm yellow for the bottom part. I'm not too concerned about the shape right now because I know I can fix that later on. The shape of those movement in here. Okay. Again. So over here, I don't have to go too dark. So I'm going to take titanium buff and ultramarine. And I'm just going to come here. It needs a bit of, it does need a bit of warm color in here. So I'm adding touch of burnt umber. It's very interesting that in that little kind of spot, there are so many different. Whenever you find you find the color a bit too cool, add burnt umber to your to the colors you're using. This is just mostly titanium buff in here right now. This is the problem with acrylics. It dries darker, but it dries in a harsh way. There's we don't have the choice of soft colored in here, soft blending, I should say. Now, coming down to this part, I'm just going to finish this and then I'll stop. Coming down to this part, I find that I'm looking at it, I'm finding that it's really dark in here. So I would say burnt umber, and of course my brush has titanium buff on it. So titanium buff, burnt umber, a touch of ultramarine, violet. So this part here is lighter, quite a bit of light in here. So I'm using titanium buff with a touch of burnt umber. Okay, I think we're good for now. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to start highlighting. So I'm using titanium buff and burnt umber. I'm going to start with this part. And I can see that the highlights are coming, like I can see the light coming from this side here. So part of the milk splashing has most of the highlights from the right. And then a bit in here on this side, darker. There's a bit of because that's volume, it's not flat, so it's thick. you get this kind of shadow on the left. So we're going to take that. I'll start with a small round brush, and then we will make our way down. And now this is where medium kind of highlight right now. So I am mixing titanium buff with a bit of burnt umber. And see here now, see this harsh line right there? I need to blend this. I need to blend it to make it, it shouldn't be a line. It should be kind of soft. And we're going to keep on highlighting slowly. So again, you know, we're not highlighting strong right now, we're kind of medium tone. So we will highlight a little bit more slowly, eventually, because we have to figure out and keep in mind that values are changing in this. From light to dark to soft to different different levels of value. See, you see now, this is like very dark now, but that's okay. We'll wait a bit. We'll keep on highlighting slowly. So when I get to this part where it's, you know, I'm highlighting, but it's, you know, getting to the dark as well in here, between the dark and the light, I soften a bit the edge. Okay, so you see now it's right. I'm seeing something slowly. Let's do that again. Highlight here. You can see the values changes. Now I'm going to take a bit of white, put it in, and you'll see that touch of white is going to make a big difference. Oh, geez, careful. All right, so now here I can see that this part is lighter.
Can you zoom in a little tighter? Perfect. Thanks.
I'm using a bit of white, titanium buff, burnt umber, touch of white. And I'm not worried right now about the thickness, the shape, none of that right now. I am really trying to make sure that the highlights are right. Touch of white in my titanium buff and burnt umber. Again, load my brush. Okay, so now the dark, sorry, I have to go back a bit. Dark that I have here needs to be adjusted. This dark right now is too strong. So in order to make it softer, I need to glaze this. So I don't want to have a thick layer. So I'm taking titanium buff and burnt umber, but I have a bit of water in there too. So I'm gonna wipe my brush and I'm just gonna come in here. It is dark, but it's not that dark. I mean, it's not that strong of a. And I can always go back. I'm adding now titanium buff. I'm adding, ultramarine violet to my titanium buff. And I'm gonna come here. Ultramarine and burnt umber, titanium buff. Come here and make sure that I don't lose that dark in here. Okay. Good. Now, I'm taking titanium buff and burnt umber. Wow, that's good. That's a soft. You'll see once we start highlighting those individually, it will look much better. We're still kind of, highlighting slowly and being careful. But once we start the strong highlights, reflections, all of that, it will look way better. So this is now titanium buff mostly. And mostly titanium buff and a bit of burnt umber, sorry, burnt umber. Okay. When you work with inexpensive canvases.
Canvas.
Yeah, canvas.
It's very hard.
Mm.
I'm pissed off. I'm complaining all the time. And up.
That's all right. Even those splashes are not exactly the same highlight everywhere. So they're highlighted more on top right here, then it's darker here, then it's highlighted again here, then it's darker there. So it's not really like one highlight.
yeah,
And that's what makes it look interesting. Okay. I don't want to overdo it.
the next time.
Oops. Okay. Again, a bit of more of the titanium buff and burnt umber. So you see when I highlight, I go really careful. I'm really careful. I add my highlights slowly. It's still drying dark, so I have to go back and adjust a bit of these highlights. This is too dark right now, right there. It's drying darker than it should. It's just titanium buff, glaze, and burnt umber. I'm softening all this. Titanium buff, burnt umber, I'm adding a bit of white. Again, titanium white, titanium buff and titanium white, touch of titanium white in there. Just a small amount of titanium white makes a big difference. I'm not going to put this kind of ring in here, movement in here yet. When I put the black, I'll add that later on. Titanium buff now, burnt umber. Again, white titanium buff. I'm going to try just white and titanium buff for now. And I'm just going to see if it's going to be okay. It will really look nice once we start working on the actual cup itself. it would look different, much nicer. Okay, so now this is too strong. I'm gonna go back, take titanium buff and burnt umber, and highlight slowly. Even this part needs to be glazed with a soft highlight. Good. Do you want me to stop? Shall I stop?
Oh,
What do you think?
No, keep going.
All right, titanium buff, burnt umber. I'm gonna start coming here, and that's really a soft, very soft. I'm not very kind of convinced with this strong dark in here, so I am softly glazing it with the tip of my brush, just to soften it a bit because it's too strong. And that's better. Much better. It really helps using titanium buff and burnt umber. I have a strong highlight in here, but I'm starting only with titanium buff and burnt umber for now. I'm going over all of those cool colors that I started with warm colors. So I'm using titanium buff and burnt umber, and I'm going over those, the purples that I had in there. So this is kind of a soft, medium tone of highlights right now. I'm just getting ready for the strong highlights. But because I had a very dark, not very dark, but more like a purple background that I started with, I am now highlighting softly with titanium buff and white. I'm sorry, titanium buff and burnt umber. And now, so for me to see what I'm doing, I'm going to switch my brushes into a small one, the small one again. I'm going to add white to my titanium buff and burnt umber. A bit of amount of white makes a big difference. Okay, so again, light is hitting from the right. And again, now I'm highlighting and I'm finding that there's a kind of a strong line in here. So again, I'm going to soften this transition between dark and light. Let's take a bit more. This is a beautiful strong highlight in here. All of this needs to be adjusted a bit, softened. Again, acrylics dries darker. So I really usually wait for it to dry completely and see what I'm getting in here. Now I don't need a small brush. I can go back to my medium size round brush, and I'm going to take titanium buff, white, mix it with my burnt umber. So I'm highlighting slowly. Adjust it a bit right here. Again. It all goes back to, once I start highlighting, I can tell where I need to go darker, where I need to, adjust my colors and my highlights and my values. And so because I'm highlighting here, this part, or this part, let's say here, this one is looking too dark right now, way too dark. So that needs to be softened. Because I started highlighting, I'm adding white and titanium buff, not white only, but because there's white in here, the dark is looking too dark. And this part needs to be highlighted a bit softly. I just have to keep an eye on my lights and darks in here. I mean, at the end of, at the end, this should look like milk. Shouldn't look too artificial. There are a couple of dots of highlights in here in white. Just kind of reflection in here. And a very kind of soft. The funny thing is, every time I highlight a part, the one next to it looks too dark. So I have to keep on adjusting. Okay. White, titanium buff. My titanium buff has burnt umber in it. And I'm going to come here it has a beautiful kind of cafe au lait or something like that. I don't know. Like this is a beautiful kind of
Creamy.
mm,
Very creamy.
cream. Yeah, yeah, very creamy,
The
thick.
color, the color we see in its light is more white or titanium buff?
The strong white, like the light.
Yes, the light, yes.
It is titanium buff, but it has white in it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, titanium buff.
It looks more white.
Yeah, it looks too white, but it
Yeah.
has no. It's not that white.
It's not that white, okay.
No, no, no.
It's more-
It's more like a
creamy white,
oh, yeah, a soft white.
soft white.
Yeah. This is titanium buff, and what I'm doing right now is titanium buff and burnt umber. So if you're seeing white, it's not that white. No.
Yeah. Sometimes the
Yeah,
camera
camera. Yeah,
shows
yeah. Camera
the
makes.
real. Yeah.
So I'm using now titanium buff and burnt umber. So you can see now there's a big difference in the values in here. So I'm going to adjust the darks. I don't want to go too light, but at the same time, this is too dark. So I'm going to take titanium buff and burnt umber and put a bit more burnt umber in my titanium buff. Right there.
No ultramarine violet, because that's
No,
what you had
no.
initially.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It will still show, but I don't want any more ultramarine violet right now. I want it more like a really soft
Mhm,
um,
mhm.
and warm color.
Mm.
Yeah, that's looking a lot more like a cafe au lait, or
Yes, yes.
No.
It looks beautiful.
Very.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. I added a touch of cadmium yellow medium with my burnt umber and titanium buff. Very, very small amount. And I'm going to come down here.
Mm.
And push it up, push up. So it's more like a very soft glazing in here right now. There. Okay. So I have warm colors in here. I'm going to wait for them to dry again, of course, to make sure that I can adjust any kind of value or, highlight or whatever needs to be adjusted. And let's put some, oh, geez. No. So I have to be careful. This part is dark. Yeah, that's it. That's not bad at all. This is burnt umber, titanium buff, and a very small amount of the leftover yellow. Okay. Again, some burnt umber, a little bit more burnt umber now. And I'm just going to put it here. Switch brushes because I need to do this part. So this part, titanium buff, burnt umber, and I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna do now I have to keep in mind that whatever I put here in terms of highlight, this part, when I start highlighting the cup itself, there should be kind of a very soft difference between this movement of that splash of milk and the cup itself. They shouldn't mix too much. They shouldn't be too close in color and highlights and in value. Otherwise they'll blend. Oh, so it should be more like rounded in here. Bit of white now. I'm mixing my white with my titanium buff. Where the rim is, I'm gonna get more of the reflection of the light. It will look much better once we start putting the actual cup, color. Okay. Bit of white with my titanium buff. Okay, put a reflection in here of light. This is titanium buff and a bit of white in my titanium buff. And I'm going to highlight this part. Anytime I find that my color is, my highlight is too strong, I go back to my titanium buff and burnt umber and I soften the highlight. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable how acrylic dries darker.
Wow.
Stop for now.